So welcome everyone to the final panel discussion of the workshop. This is after the review, revision and resubmission of NSF career proposals. My name is Dan Wasserman. I'm a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. And I have served on many career panels, but I guess my real bona fides come from the fact that I at one point had to revise and resubmit my career proposal, which I successfully did. So I've been declined for the career and I have gone through the process of revision and resubmission. So those are my limited bona fides, but our co-host today has actual real bona fides. So it's my pleasure to introduce Steve Peretti. Steve?
So I was formerly a professor in chemical and biomolecular engineering at North Carolina State. Most recently, I am the program director of the cellular and biochemical engineering program in CBET, and I have run, I believe it is 6 or 7 career panels, at least by this time. So I've seen resubmissions and the whole spectrum of proposals.
Wonderful. And just for the record, I review proposals in both DMR and ECCS, but the program of relevance would be ECCS here. So, okay. So what we want to do is Steve and I put together a short PowerPoint presentation. So we'd like to, take maybe 15, 20 minutes to sort of go through that. And then we'll take questions from everybody and just try to answer them as best we can. So please, feel free to start putting questions. If you have questions as we're going through the slides, put them into the sticky note thing, and Steve and I will keep an eye on it and then answer them after we're done with the presentation. So the way we'll do this is I'll read through a slide and then Steve will chime in with his thoughts and corrections and amplifications of whatever it is I said. So why are we all here? Well, let's suppose your career proposal was declined, right? So then the question becomes, what's next? What do you do next, right? So I think it's important to sort of understand what happened in the panel when you think about what to do next with your career proposal, right? And how to deal with this. So your project was reviewed by senior faculty experts, and their combined expertise should span the range of topics considered in the panel. And the program managers are really good about assembling knowledgeable panels whose expertise spans the range of all the proposals they've submitted. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of sort of organization and care to be able to do that while also managing conflict of interest and all these sorts of things. And it's not a trivial job. So they spend a lot of time figuring that out. It is conceivable, maybe even likely, that one person on the panel has direct expertise in the area of your proposal, but it's not necessarily the case. And it is likely that at least a number of people who review your proposal may have tangential expertise, but perhaps not expertise in the exact area of your proposal. Now, when you receive that declination, the first thing that you probably want to do is fire off a couple of angry emails. In particular, really get at that reviewer number 3 who clearly doesn't understand what you're up to. But I actually strongly recommend that instead of firing off crazy emails to the program manager, that you sort of take a little bit of time and let it sink in a little bit and let the reviews settle before really analyzing them, right? I wish I could say that the declinations slow down as you get further along in your career, or that they hurt less. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. They still sting. But it's always a good idea to sort of take some time to reflect before doing anything. So take your time and reflect on the panel summary primarily. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between the individual reviews and the panel summary, but it's the panel summary that really reflects the discussion that the panel had about your proposal, okay? You have to remember the way it works is that the reviewers get your proposal perhaps a month in advance, and they're reading it at home, maybe at work, right? And maybe they read it a couple times, maybe they're reading the associated papers, and then they write their reviews, and those are submitted into the NSF software. Then when you get to the actual panel, all the panelists are sitting together in a room. The people who review the proposal read through the reviews, and then the floor is opened up for a larger discussion. And that's when you really start going back and forth, and certain things that are raised in individual reviews might be shot down or might be amplified. You might have not noticed something and it's a big flaw, and you pick it up because somebody who's expert in the field notices it. And it is the panel summary that truly sort of reflects the consensus, to the extent that there was a consensus, about your proposal. Now, it's important to remember that the proposal is a teaching tool, right? So you're telling the story of your research vision to the panel. Not all of the panelists or reviewers are experts in your specific research area, so you have to educate them. So if they criticize it, oftentimes that criticism comes from a miscommunication. Namely, you did not present the importance, the impact, the novelty, the transformative nature of your proposal sufficiently, in a sufficiently clear way that the panel could pick up on that. Steve?
Catch me mid-sip. So the reason why we put this proposal as a teaching tool is because it allows you to take a step back from the emotional sting of being rejected and of having some maybe sharply critical things said, and put you in a mindset that's more effective in terms of how do you respond to it. If you look at these things as, you know, a short-circuited communication, then you ask yourself, what do I need to tell the next panel so that this criticism disappears? Okay, like, why would they criticize this? Because I thought I addressed it. Let me go back and see, maybe I wasn't clear enough, or maybe I didn't refer to, you know, some particular activities in the field because I expected everybody to know it, or, you know, something else. And so, you know, when I say, you know, when we say miscommunication, you could also say it's unmet expectations. They were expecting something explained to them. You were expecting you didn't have to. They were expecting something to be there. You didn't think it was necessary to put there, whatever. So it helps you to get past the pain and anguish of the rejection and the criticism to, okay, so how do I productively address that? Goddamn.
Thank you, Steve. You want to take note of the positive aspects of your reviews, of course, and read them for the largest impact adjustments to the project. So you want to look for words like novelty or innovative or transformative, right? Those are the aspects of the proposal that you really want to emphasize. And you want to be able to figure out what parts of the proposal need to be changed that are going to give you the biggest delta over the last submission, right? So in general, it has been my experience that panelists really make an effort to provide constructive feedback that can help the proposal improve upon resubmission. And bear in mind, constructive can also be, this proposal shouldn't be resubmitted. You know, it should be something new, because you only have 3 shots. And if the panel lets you think that this is salvageable and it's not, and we'll talk a little bit about how to determine that, then they're not doing you any favors. If they don't think that this is a proposal that can sort of go through on the topics that are proposed, right? You want to look for criticisms that are mentioned more than once, particularly criticisms that go from the individual reviews and make it into the panel summary, right? So the panel discusses things. Sometimes you'll have an individual complaint. Maybe the person's not that sort of expert in your field, and that gets shot down. It doesn't make it into the panel summary. But if you start to see, or if you see something, a complaint on multiple individual reviews, and it also shows up in the panel summary, then that's probably a good indication that that's something that you need to address. And then finally, you want to make an appointment via email with your program director for additional insight. And you want to think a little bit about how you might, or the different ways that you might improve your proposal before you talk to your program director. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to prepare for that discussion. But before we do, Steve?
Program directors actually want to help you be successful, because honestly, I hate sending declinations. You know, I would rather every proposal came in wonderful, and then I would scream about how they all need to be funded. Okay. So they want to help you develop as best you can. So take advantage of that. Now, depending on the time of year and everything else, they're not always necessarily the most prompt responders, but that is not a I'm ignoring you or I don't like you or whatever. It is usually I barely get home at night to eat. Like things are that busy right now. So give them a a week, and if they haven't responded, yeah, you send them a little ping saying, hey, just checking up. I still want to talk to you about this thing. How are you next Thursday? Or something. As a way to like make it easy for them to just go, oh, sure, Thursday, great, yes. It's
Yeah.
The point is to talk to them. So, make it easy for them to do that.
Yeah. So before you talk to the program manager, right, there's a couple of things that you want to think about, right? And the most important question that you need to answer is the core concept that you proposed a good fit with the career program? That's the fundamental question, right? So basically what you're asking is this proposal salvageable? Right. So is it a matter of, to use a metaphor, right, hanging some new pictures and maybe changing the paint color, sort of fixing the lighting around the house, or you need to sort of tear down to the studs and renovate, or do you need to just basically burn it to the ground and just start off and build something entirely new, right? And that's really sort of the fundamental question that you need to answer before you write your revised proposal, right? And along those lines, does this project represent who I am now as a researcher and educator, or who I want to be? Remember that the career proposal, the whole idea of the career proposal is it's supposed to be essentially the foundation for your early career, right? You are supposed to have a vision of where you want to be in 5 or 10 years, and you want the career proposal is the thing that is going to help you get to that point. 5 years down the road, of course, it's a 5-year proposal, but it's setting the stage for the next 5 years of your life as a scholar and as a educator, right? And it may well be the case that an immediate resubmission is not the best strategy, right? So it might be that if you need additional preliminary data, or if basically you get your declination only a month or two before, or a couple of months before the next deadline, maybe it's not such a great idea to sort of scramble and put together something new, especially if you need to make some revisions to the proposal, or if you need to change directions. Steve?
Another reason why I talk with PIs about not necessarily immediately resubmitting is because you're early in your career, you've got more than one idea, and maybe your first submission was the one that you know best. So it's the one that's closest to your current skill set, where if you think about what you really want to be doing 10 years from now, it's going to require you to develop a new set of skills. And so maybe you want to take the time to look at, what do I ultimately want to do? Not what do I think I can write about intelligently right this minute? And if that's what I want to do, what do I need to do to get in a position to be able to do that? And so maybe it's going to be, a year of talking to other people, networking, bouncing ideas off of them before you're like, yeah, okay, now I've got a clearer picture of what I want to do next. And maybe I take this one and it just becomes a regular unsolicited proposal, because it's not as exciting as the stuff I now decide I really want to do. And so there's a lot of reasons for, rethinking should I just keep cranking until I either use up my 3 or I actually get one, versus what's my career going to look like? 10 years from now, it may not matter if I got my second one funded versus my third one, if I'm on a good trajectory. So what's that trajectory I want to be on? Dan?
Okay, so you've managed to get that time to talk to your program manager, and what is it that you want to ask them, right? So I think the sort of first and perhaps most important thing is, did the panel think that the core concept is a good fit with the career program? All right. And this again goes back to the idea of, is the idea salvageable, right? So is the concept sufficiently innovative? Is the scope appropriate? What characteristics were shared amongst the strongest proposals? In other words, what was it that the panel was looking for? And remember, your program director is essentially the fly in the wall for all of those discussions about your proposal and all the other proposals that were also in the panel. So while they can't provide sort of technical feedback, they can provide a bigger picture feedback, and they can give you an idea of what was happening in that panel discussion, right? Now, it's important that you let them know how you interpret the tone and direction of the panel summary and reviews, because it may be that the tone comes off more negative than it in fact was, or maybe less negative. And the program director is the one person who knows that and can tell you. Now, again, they cannot reveal any information about reviewers or exact things that were said and by who in the panel, but of course they can give you a sense of the gist of the conversation and the flow of that conversation and sort of the general tone, right? And it's important, right, that you don't misuse this time with your program director, right? Their time is incredibly valuable. And if you spend that time asking them technical questions about what it is that you proposed, that's a huge waste of everybody's time. What you want to be asking them are bigger picture questions, right? And they may not be an expert in your field. They're an expert in some field, and they probably are quite knowledgeable about your field, but they're not going to answer technical questions about your proposal.
I want to emphasize that we're not writing your proposal for you, because honestly, we don't know what the next panel is going to look like anyway. And so we can tell you, oh, I think this is a great idea, and the next panel may hate it. Plus, this is your life, not ours. And so, honestly, these are your decisions based on, what do you want to do? What do you think is important? But we can help you to make sure that you interpret the feedback you're getting accurately, and to help you understand maybe why you're trying to make, or why you're thinking about making the changes that you're thinking about making, and whether that makes sense in terms of developing your career. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, so what are some of the sort of common deficiencies that we see in proposals? The first is the project concept was not well supported, and the project scope and approach were not clearly defined, right? So what you were going to do was not stated early in the proposal. And I can't sort of emphasize this enough. You want to make the proposal easy to read. You want the reviewers and the panelists to enjoy reading your proposal, and for it to be obvious what it is that you're going to do and why that is so important and so transformative, and what the outcomes of that effort are going to be, right? So other sort of deficiencies would be projects not placed in the context of state of the art, right? So it's not clear where this supposed innovation that you're sort of pushing it actually sits in the state of the art. Also, the project's activities were too broad and numerous for the time period and resources. Remember, this is a 5-year project, which is great, but for most universities, that the funding scope is on the order of one full-time grad student, right? Now that can be depends on the sort of the way your school does accounting and how big your endowment is and whatnot. But in general, for most of us, we can support one student on a career. And then the flip side of that would be that the project's activities were narrow in scope, better suited for a single PI unsolicited NSF proposal. And look, I know what you're probably thinking, which is those two things, there's not a lot of space between them. And in fact, you'd be right. It's a tightrope that you're walking, right? So this proposal, this career is supposed to serve as the foundation for your early career, right? Which you would presume you probably have a pretty wide vision for what that's going to be, but you can't make it too broad because you can only fund one student on it. But if you make it too narrow, then you're going to get, oh, this should be an unsolicited and not a career. So I wish I could help you. That one is just, that's the, that's the dilemma you face. That's the tightrope you walk. And all I can do is sort of point out to you that, hey, there's the tightrope that you got to walk across. It is. Another thing is, and this is key to the career more than probably any other NSF proposal. The integration of research and education is absolutely central to the career. So you need to show how your research informs the educational aspects of the proposal, and ideally how the educational aspects of the proposal inform the research. And then finally, the project's outcomes were not clearly stated. Again, this comes down to making it very clear to the reviewers what it is you're going to do and what's going to come out of this research, right? And that means both on the technical aspects, the intellectual merit of the proposal, but also on the broader impacts, the societal outcomes that can come from that proposal. Steve.
I want to just point your attention to bullet number 3, which doesn't sound like much. The project was not placed in context to state-of-the-art practice. That's often the critical point that reviewers come up with when they're trying to figure out, how innovative is this? You say, oh, this is fabulous, it's going to transform this particular area, but you don't give them enough. Here's where the area is now. And here's why this is not just an incremental step forward, but a leap forward. And a lot of it just, they don't talk about the other folks doing research, the other results in the field. They just start almost with a given, assuming that the reviewers know what the state of the art is in the field, and they just move forward. And that's a mistake. I'm not saying you have to spend a whole lot of time on it, but if you ignore it, that's the kind of thing that comes back to bite a lot of proposals.
Yeah. Okay, other considerations. And this is probably gonna get us a couple of questions. It has for the last few panels. Is the proposed research sufficiently independent of the PI's PhD and postdoc advisors? Would the project advance the PI's long-term career vision, right? So again, this is what we talked about earlier. What do you want to be known for 10 years from now? And does this project move you in the right direction? Is the project more than incremental? Is the scope sufficiently ambitious and doable in 5 years? What is the likelihood that the project will achieve effective integration of research and educational activities? And then for some programs, the lack of a testable hypothesis. Steve, did you have any?
No.
All right. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing. And I think we'll move to the Q&A portion of our discussion. And it looks like we already have a few questions. Thank you. So I don't know, Steve, if you want to.
Let me take the first couple. So if a PI has received several NSF grants in the past and demonstrated in the past integration of research with education, what advice would you give to that PI when applying for the career? I guess what I would say is, don't feel like you have to invent something absolutely new. If you've got relationships and networks that are working in terms of outreach, integration, whatever, do more, make it clear what this award is going to enable that you're currently not able to do or not doing. But you don't have to like, oh, gee, I already work with this high school, I already do this thing, I have to propose something completely new. No, you have to propose something that is in addition to and is effective. Okay, you don't suddenly, well, I've been developing lab experiments for high school students, now let me develop a podcast. Maybe, but not required. Maybe there's another set of experiments. Maybe there's a middle school that you want to expand to. I mean, think about emphasizing and leveraging your existing strengths and the strengths of your local environment. Use that as a force multiplier. it's as opposed to, oh, I have to like come up with something completely from scratch. No, you don't. And in number 62.
Right, if I could just jump in really
Yeah,
quickly,
okay,
right?
go ahead.
I think
Sorry.
one of the things that's really important about the career, and I think that a lot of people miss on the first time they submit, is that the education and outreach component of the career is significant. And if you don't think about it in the same way that you think about your research, right, in terms of building capabilities and building networks to be able to do that more effectively, your career proposal is going to suffer, and the panel is going to pick up on that. The way you need to be thinking about, in the same way that you think about getting preliminary data for your research, you want to be thinking about getting sort of preliminary contacts and efforts and preliminary programs on the outreach and education component. And then your career can really allow you to sort of take those preliminary efforts and turn them into something. Those are evidence that you can do this, that you're committed to this, and then you turn that into something that is sort of coherent as part of your career proposal. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, sorry. And number 62, is it a good idea to submit an underdeveloped career proposal on purpose to get reviewer feedback that helps us refine our ideas? I cannot say this strongly enough. No, 1,000 times no. What you have to remember, okay, is that if you're submitting a career proposal to a particular program, you're submitting it to what you hope to be your peer group. And if you send them half-baked garbage, that's their first impression of you. Like, oh, this person is not serious. This person is trying to use us as their thesis advisor. No, that's not our job. And so you just don't want to go anywhere near that. So please don't do that.
It's really important to remember now, right, that like what comes out of your lab reflects on you. And you're building a reputation right now, as an independent PI. And so it's not just your proposals, but it is your proposals. It's also your papers, right? The people who are reviewing your papers are people in the field. That you do want to make sure that what comes out of your group, and I'm crazy with my students about this. Like, I have very strict controls on like what comes out of the group, nothing that I haven't seen. And it's really important because one bad thing coming out of your group with your name attached to it, like that can follow you, right? That's the first impression that somebody might have of you, and that could follow you for the rest of your career. Like that person, they're not careful, and you never know when that panelist that read your sloppy proposal might be a letter writer for you, or might be considering you for some award or something like that. So I just want to reinforce what Steve said. Absolutely not. No, don't do that.
Right. Okay. So it's 63. This may be a bit off topic, but we're resubmitting. We're obviously further in our career. Do you think that being active in one's campus leadership improves the strength of the proposal? Not like independent of what is going on in the proposal. So having that level of activity indicates that you're someone who can organize things, can work with other people, is interested in doing outreach. And so it sets the, are you just checking a box, or is this something you're really interested in? And so, yes, it deepens your expertise in that particular area. But if you write a crummy proposal, it's not going to matter. If you write a poor outreach section, it's not going to matter that you're the associate dean for development. It's like, sorry, didn't work. So not per se, but presumably if you've been in a leadership position, you should have some really interesting ideas about what should happen next. And it's the interesting ideas that you put in that are going to be taken seriously, or evaluated seriously. And so it feeds your ability to write a good proposal. It's not looked at as, oh, because this person does this, therefore, because people do a lot of good things and then write crummy proposals.
And, the other thing to bear in mind is, of course, you all know that as academics, our job is the three-legged stool, right? It's service, teaching, and research, right? And, I think one of the things that a lot of times you see in proposals from young PIs is, as part of the education, they're going to mentor graduate students. Well, that's good, because if you don't mentor graduate students, you're probably not going to get any research done, and then your lab's going to sort of fall apart. But it's also, that's kind of your job. That's what you're supposed to do. So, it's great. It's fine to mention that you're going to mentor graduate students, but, that's expected. That's baseline. So the question is, like, what are you doing? Like, what is this career proposal, if it's awarded? What is it going to allow you to do? What is it going to spur you to do that is sort of going to build that aspect of your, of who you are and who you want to be as an academic, right? So that's the way to think about it, right? It's not, what are you already doing? We're supposed to be doing service. We're supposed to be doing teaching, all that sort of stuff, right? If there's a new class that sort of is tied to the research, and that you have some unique, novel, transformative, class that you're going to teach, that could certainly fit. But if you're just saying, well, I haven't taught, EMAG before, so I'm going to start teaching EMAG. Well, that's what we do as academics. We teach different classes, right? So that's probably not going to be looked at as kindly from the panel. You're not going to get points taken off for that, but it's not going to add a lot of value to your proposal. The next question is one I think that we've seen all 4 of these hours. It's how to deal with mixed reviews, namely going from excellent to fair, very innovative to not innovative. And I'll give my take, and then Steve will jump in. And it sort of ties back to what I said at the beginning of the slide presentation, which is, you really want to look at the panel summary, because you have to remember that your panelists come from a sort of broad range of sort of subdisciplines within the larger field. And, some may not be as expert in your area as others. So when you see that sort of broad range of reviews, what you want to look at is, you want to look at the panel summary and see which arguments won the day, right? Were the Fs the ones who were presumably the experts in your field, and those arguments were the ones that sort of ended up in the panel summary, and clearly were the reason why your proposal was not accepted or recommended? Or were those sort of diluted a little bit, and mostly the positive aspects, and maybe you were sort of close to being recommended or highly recommended, but not quite, right? So a lot of times people will go back after a panel summary discussion that sort of, where one view wins out, they will go back and change their actual reviews, or sometimes just their scores, but not always. So sometimes what those scores are, they're sort of, they're artifacts of what those reviewers thought before the panel summary, right?
What I would add to, I guess, the other half of this question, how do you balance between being ambitious versus the next panel thinking it's not ambitious enough? I would say this is a communications issue. If you haven't set the context, and you haven't made it clear what the state of the art is and why this is possible, and if you haven't made it clear that you recognize that some of it might not work, but here's why it very well may, then you leave it up to the individual reviewers to decide whether it's too ambitious or not. Whereas if you make it clear, here's what can be done, here's what has been done previously, here's why this is a stretch but not an insane one, and here's why a graduate student does not have to spend 23 hours a day in the lab for 5 years to get it done. If you don't communicate that, you're asking the individual reviewer to project, well, how productive do I think this is going to be? How well organized is this thing going to be? Where is the cutting edge versus not? I mean, if you ask them to fill in the blanks, you're asking for trouble. So I don't think it's necessarily the case that you have to change your degree of ambition, but you have to explain why it's possible. Okay? So much of reviews come out of, this was not explained. It might be, but it might not. And because they didn't explain it, we're not sure they understand it. Okay? And that's a kicker. We're like, if they don't identify any serious potential, bumps in the road, we're not sure they actually understand what this means, because we work in this area and we know that the first time you turn left, you get a flat tire and you're in trouble. So you don't want to give them the opportunity to make those kinds of judgments. Don't give them the chance, give them the information.
The next question is probably one for Steve. When do you typically hear back on acceptance declination? You said it could be only a few months for the next deadline.
So this is a practical fact of the bizarre way that the United States government funds things. Because instead of starting the fiscal year with an entire year's budget, we have, a continuing resolution till December, a continuing resolution till March, a continuing resolution until, okay, finally, in June, we get a budget through the end of September. What that means is that, let's say, I'll pick my program for example. I usually can fund between 5 and 6 career proposals. But if I have a seventh one that I think is really good, I may have to hold it until I have enough money to be able to fund it. Or I may never get enough money to fund it. And then I'm like, okay, or maybe I hold 2 of them and I only get enough money for 1. And so you might not be hearing until now, potentially, just because of how interesting and only semi-productive, some of the fun, the flow of funds is. So anyway.
So another question that we are getting a lot, which is, what is sufficient evidence to prove my ability in a new area? I have my background in control and game, but recently expanded to machine learning. I want to be able to persuade reviewers that I can do machine learning. So I think that it's a good question. I think, one of the beautiful things about science, of course, is that ideally science is objective. So, if you write a compelling proposal that makes compelling arguments and shows a clear mastery of the topic, then the panel, even with expertise in that topic, is going to appreciate that. And if it's a good idea, then they might just fund it or recommend it for funding, at least, right? So ultimately, yes, of course, it's great if you have 600 papers in the field and you're world renowned, but ultimately, write the best proposal. And if you get it right, if you really do understand this stuff, then it's the idea, the hope, in the ideal world. The NSF panel is not about pedigree, right? You want to show that you have the facilities, right? The actual physical facilities to do the things that you say. And then it's your proposal. You're trying to make the case that you really get this. You have some valuable insight into this area. There's something really exciting that you can do with these ideas. And if you truly understand the the material, if you truly understand the area, then that's going to come through in the proposal. And I've rarely seen a panel count papers from a PI on a career proposal. If there's a paper, if there's some evidence that they clearly understand what they're talking about, that is usually sufficient for a panel.
And what I would add to that is, if you want to establish credibility independent of the number of publications in a particular area, be sure to, if you explain, why am I choosing, for example, this particular machine learning approach? People use other ones. Here's their shortcomings. Here's why I'm going to apply this. Here's the model system I'm going to work on, and here's why. And then if you also identify, I understand that there could be problems, this could happen, you know, this could go wrong, this could be whatever. And if that happens, then I'll default back to a different strategy, which won't get me as much information, but will keep moving the ball down the field. That, independent of publications, indicates to a panel they actually understand enough so that they've identified what the major problems are, and they made a good case for using this particular machine learning strategy as opposed to that one. Like, okay, that made sense, and they explained it. Okay.
So, and I guess the one other thing that can go a long way in that regard is, you know, if you know the literature, all right, if you don't know the literature, that's always going to be problematic. People are often going to pick up on that. But if you know the literature, if you clearly understand the literature, then I think that is necessary but not sufficient to show that you're competent in this new area.
One more thing about
yeah.
a new area, real quickly. If you happen to be at UT Austin and you need some expertise that Dan has, if you list Dan as, Dan is going to teach my students how to do this, or Dan is going to, you know, run some samples, do some things that we don't know how to do yet, and Dan's an expert in this area, that's fine. Okay, that's another way to address the, I've never done this before, but I have a colleague who is going to be a helper, an instructor, not a director of research. And one of the things I want to do with this career award is to develop that skill set so that I can take it way the heck farther down the road. So that's another way to address that, is to use local resources in a very supportive manner.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. The next question is sort of along the same lines. How much experience is required in the field of the research proposal if we want to shift our research focus and have been working at it for a while, but not in the field of the PhD and postdoc? Would that be an issue? I think that ties back to the last question. Again, you know, the idea is to write a strong proposal, and if you have no publications in the field, then I would say that, you know, it's probably falls upon you to write a stronger proposal in the sense of sort of demonstrating that you have a really good handle on this area and a really good handle on this topic. You know, everybody in this Zoom, perhaps, you know, myself excluded, everyone is really, really bright. You all are incredibly smart. You didn't get to where you are by not being smart, right? So, and the PhD, if it teaches us one thing, as you all know, is to learn how to learn, right? And to learn how to do things that no one's done before, and to sort of tackle new and exciting projects that people haven't done before. So by definition, you've been trained to do new things. You just haven't done them yet because you're busy doing other new things. And so, you know, by definition, your training is such that you should be able to take something new on. You just have to show to the panel that you're the person to do this and that you understand this area that you're wading into.
Next.
So do program managers mention previous panel's views in a new panel? For example, the previous panel thought this proposal was too ambitious. The PI has reduced the objectives. Now the panel thinks it could go a little bit further. Would the PI I think the program manager chime in and mention that history, then like a budget negotiation to negotiate the tasks with the PI?
Nope. This panel has no claim on any prior information, and they're not privy to anything. And a program manager should never, would never talk about, oh, this thing came in 2 years ago, and no, absolutely not. That would be a breach of confidentiality, honestly. So doesn't happen. Do I distribute proposals to different panels according to the topic and the project summary? I feel like the panel's reviewers are not in my area. Program directors do not just use the project summary because sometimes they're well written, sometimes they're less well written. They will at least skim, if not read through your entire proposal and say, okay, who are the people in the area who are working on stuff like this? Because we want to bring in intelligent expert reviews because it makes our job easier. I get an expert opinion. It's easier for me to say, oh, okay, good idea. We should recommend this or not. So no, we spend plenty of time up front looking at the proposal, the details of, because, for example, a proposal might focus on a particular research question. Sometimes it focuses on the use of a particular analytical technique. You know, I have to find somebody who is a TEM expert to be somebody on the panel to review this particular proposal because this is heavily weighted on using this technique to do some things that it's never done before. Okay, so we spend a good bit of time trying to figure that out. Career panels, it depends on how many career proposals a given program gets. If they get enough of them, they will have multiple panels. If they get a small number and they feel like they're close enough that there can be some experts and some generalists in the review, panel, then they'll do that. So, I think that's a program by program decision.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, I thought what Steve was going to say was just talk to your program manager.
Well, there's that too.
Because you do want to get in touch with the program manager for the area that you're interested in submitting, and if you talk to them and say, hey, it sometimes seems like the panel doesn't have the expertise in this area. Well, first of all, it could be that you haven't done an adequate job in sort of describing the proposal, and so people are left a little bit confused. But it's also possible that maybe you should be submitting to a different program manager, or maybe you should be submitting to a different area, and the program manager can help you with that, and they might have a better sense. They know what their portfolio looks like, but maybe there's someone else's portfolio that includes your kind of work and you're a better fit with, and maybe they can even make that introduction and sort of transfer you over there. And that often that can happen behind the scenes. You can have things sort of move because the program manager knows that they're a better fit with somebody else. But if you reach out to the program manager, that's your best bet to figure out that problem. Yeah.
And let me just piggyback on one of Dan's comments. Part of reading the proposal is to figure out, wait a second, does it really belong in this program? Because there's a lot of there are programs that have some overlap, or are close enough so that you and I could have talked about this proposal and what the CBE program is interested in and what we're focused on, and then you write the proposal. And if I look at this and say, oh my gosh, this really sounds much more like a systems and synthetic biology program proposal, or a chemistry of life processes proposal, or something else, I'm going to contact that program manager and say, David, would you please read this over and see if you think this is a really good fit for your program, because I think it's a pretty good fit for mine, but I think it might be better for yours. And that happens, I mean, not a lot, because usually people actually do target the right programs, but sometimes, depending on what the emphasis of their research is, it can be in a gray area. And we are motivated to get the best review, and I don't mean the most positive, I mean the most expert review for your proposal, so that you get the best feedback. And normally, I think in general, we will tell you before we transfer, like, hey, this actually, I think it belongs over there. That program manager thinks it belongs over there. Unless you have some really strong reason why it should stay with me, I'm going to move it. And usually the response by the PI is, thank you for finding its home. So we spend a lot more time with these proposals than you might think, because we're really trying to make ways to identify the folks who are in the best position to evaluate just how interesting and important your project is.
We've run out of questions, so now you can just holler them from the Zoom.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I am video again. So I got a comment from a reviewer. I posted here in the chat as well. It says that I got, several letter of collaborations from different, full professor were willing to mentor me during my, career project. And I got a comment that says that the PI is not able to conduct the proposed research independently and needs the help from collaborators. So what would be your take on this? Would you recommend that, I drop my collaborators, or for this round, I don't get it.
So here's the thing. It used to be, up until about, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, that career proposals were not allowed to have any other collaborators, support people, nothing. Okay. You couldn't ask Dan to run, samples through his machine. Couldn't happen. We relaxed that because we recognized that, particularly at the start of their career, not everybody knows everything that they want to do. What that is telling you is, either you had so many collaborators that they felt like you were just organizing your collaborators, or that it wasn't clear what your intellectual leadership was in the project. Okay, and I'm not saying it wasn't there, but it wasn't clearly stated somehow. Okay. And so they looked and say, we don't know her, we know these other guys, and they're all, well accomplished. She's kind of doing a little of this and a little of that. We can't tell if she's really in charge or if she's just kind of like a super glorified postdoc. And so you got to make sure that that's clearly explained in the document of, how it is that, no, this is really yours. And all I'm asking this person to do is this little, almost like a contract, activity where they do some essays, or they do, this thing or that thing. And so I see that as a communication question, not a, oh, do I drop them? The other thing is, take a step back and maybe the reviewers are right, and this particular project is so big and requires so much stuff that maybe you should just submit it as a unsolicited with a bunch of actual collaborators. I mean, I don't know, but but I think you ask yourself the question, and if you don't think, oh no, I'm actually not leaning on them very much, then you got to be clearer in the writing so that they don't think that this support person is actually a significant collaborator. Dan?
Yeah, that's the key. I mean, what you don't want is you don't want the proposal to read like you cannot get to where you want to go without the support of these, like that what they're going to provide is fundamental in getting where you want to go, right? You want them, of course, to add value, but they can't be sort of foundational to the project, because then I think people are going to raise eyebrows and say, then if this project success requires the collaborative efforts from 6 other faculty across 3 universities, that's not really, I think, what a lot of panelists sort of think about the career as. And of course, we all know that science is collaborative, and like in the real world, once you get the career money, like you're probably going to collaborate with people and they're probably going to help you do stuff, because that's just the way it works in science. But you want to show in your proposal that the lion's share of what is going to be done by your group, in your group, and you're not going to be reliant for the success of the proposal on somebody outside, because you can't trust us senior people.
Yeah, I want a short following up question about the fundamental contribution for the collaborator. And my situation is that my research relies on the collaborator's resource. It's a special resource, is a mock-up warehouse. Do you treat this as fundamental? Because the only thing I rely on is there's a resource. But without them, probably it's difficult without the resource, difficult for me to make the contribution.
So when Dan says, absolutely rely on them, he is, I think, referring more, and panels are referring more to intellectual leadership.
Okay.
I mean, sure, somebody has an NMR that you need to use, and you don't know how to run one, they're going to run samples for you. Yes, you need those samples run, but you could get them run by somebody else. It's not that not only are they going to run the samples, but they're going to interpret everything, and they're going to suggest the next set of experiments to do. That's when you lose it. Okay, so equipment is the easiest thing to make clear, like I need their X and I don't have one. But if panels, reviewers can interpret, oh, this sounds like the kinds of things that this other collaborator is already doing, and so are they intellectually leading this? That's when you run into trouble.
Okay, I got it. Thanks. Yeah.
If you have questions, if you raise your hand, you suddenly come to the front of the pile and we can see you. Whereas if you're on page 3, we can't. And also, we've got about 2 minutes left before we're supposed to go to break again.
Lichun?
Yes. So actually, I know that our reviewers are very experienced. So my question is like, how to make them enthusiastic? So it's a very general question, but I think because they're very experienced, so it might be hard to kind of satisfy them.
So that's a really good question, and it's come up a couple of times. And I thought about it after the first time. I didn't give a good answer the first time, and I thought about it, and I think there are a couple of things that you can do. I mean, obviously, writing a technically sound proposal about a transformative idea, yes, that's ultimately the goal of your career proposal. But panelists are human beings, and human beings do not like reading 6 pages of 9-point font text without figures, or with 1-inch square figures, and you can't make anything out, right? If you make your proposal an absolute slog to read, by the time the reviewer gets done with your proposal, they're going to be unhappy, and you don't want a proposal that makes a reviewer unhappy. And again, in the ideal world, the reviewers, the panelists are utterly impervious, and they're purely just going on the merits of the argument that you're making. But in the real world, they have 8 to 10 proposals that they have to read. And if yours is just an absolute nightmare and filled with formatting mistakes and typographical errors and grammatical mistakes and missing references, and all the references are mislabeled and you can't see any of the figures, well, a panelist is going to get grumpy. So you want to make your proposal easy to read. You want the panelists to be happy when they're reading your proposal. So make it clear what it is what you're saying. Make the figures clear, make the formatting clear, right? Double check it when you make that transition from Word to PDF, then read the PDF, because you know a lot of things can go wrong during that transmission and or transition. And if you submit a proposal to NSF, and I have seen this, that is full of error bookmark not found, you know, panelists are going to say, well, why should I dedicate so much of my time to this proposal where clearly the PI wasn't able to really take a lot of time to sort of even ensure that what they were submitting made sense. So those are non-technical things that you can do to make a panelist more likely to be receptive to the argument that you make. It still boils down to your technical argument and your educational outreach and whatnot, right?
The other thing I would say is that program managers have plenty of senior people to choose from, and they're looking for the senior people who are not so my way or the highway, that they're open to new stuff, considering things they hadn't thought of before. You know, so yes, folks who are established can feel, you know, sometimes it seems like, oh my gosh, they've seen everything. Well, but they haven't, because they haven't been in a lab in 15, 20 years. They have no idea what this technique is. They have no idea what machine learning is. I mean, like, it's kind of scary sometimes. Their postdocs do.
I feel like you're talking to me. I feel this and taking this very personally.
I mean, like, hell, it was me until I left. Are you kidding? Okay, so we're actually just past 3:30. Eleonora, I'm happy to, you know, hang on and answer your question, but otherwise, everybody, we got a break for 10 minutes until conversations with program directors.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah. So maybe we'll take this last question from Eleonora, and then I'll close this room.
Okay.
You have 7 minutes as of right now until.
Okay. Eleonora, let's do a speed consult here.
Yeah. I'll try to be quick. So I have a funded CRII proposal, and I was wondering, like, what's the relationship that is expected between CRII and career? Like, can the career be building off the CRI, the Career Research Initiative?
So here's the thing. We're looking for innovation as opposed to incremental. If this looks like a straight line extrapolation of any proposal that you've got, CRII or anything else, and this is just like, oh, the next thing is this, panels are going to be less impressed with that than if they can see this project is going here. And yes, you're taking some of the things you've learned from this, and now you're going to do something that isn't just an extension of this. Okay, it's a new direction. It's a new problem. It's something that's like, I learned a bunch from this, and here's where I'm going to take this information.
Okay. So best unrelated or somewhat related, but not so much.
Right. And I can't tell you how many degrees of variation you need. But
yeah, that's really difficult, but I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good luck.